please introduce yourself. I know we know you, but it's a new seat, new governor, so if you would tell us a little bit about why you want to be a judge.
Good afternoon. I'm Ryan Will. I've been a lawyer for about 15 years, practicing 14 in the state attorney's office, currently serving as a homicide prosecutor for the last 11 years. My entire life I've wanted to be a judge, and I've worked real hard to gear myself up to both have the ability and the skill to sit as a judge in this community and help our community reach its full potential and grow into the next century. I grew up in a home where my father was a lawyer and then a judge, and it was kind of a natural thing for me to recognize the ways that he helped people in the community and to, in turn, want to kind of follow in his footsteps. I've spent the majority of my practice kind of preparing myself for this eventuality, and hopefully will one day achieve it with your help. This is my 5th interview with the committee. I ran for office last year, as all of you know. I received broad support in the 4 counties. Unfortunately, was unsuccessful in the election bid, but ran a high-energy, very positive campaign that I'm very proud of. What else did you ask?
Well, so the follow-up is why Flagler? What's your connection or interest here?
Well, I grew up just down the road in Ormond Beach. Flagler County is not far from my home. The issues that affect the citizens of Flagler County also affect the citizens of Volusia County and St. Johns and Putnam counties. There's an open seat here that's been created by the legislature and the governor. And as you know, I've been a person who's been applying for roughly the last 3 years once I felt that I had the qualifications to reach this position. And so when the seat came available to me, I thought that I should pursue it. My wife and I have been talking recently about moving anyway, and we've been looking at some property in Flagler County, so it's not a large adjustment for the life that we're currently living.
Open it up to other commissioners.
Ryan, tell us about what's, electability, of course, is such a big issue for us in the governor's office. Tell us your thoughts and post-mortem, if you will, on the election.
On my election?
Yes.
The thing about the election is that there's been a trend in Florida politics and nonpartisan races for probably the last 12 years, the last 3 election cycles, where women have predominantly won the races. And while we need more women judges, we need more qualified women judges. And I think what we saw in my election was the continuation of a sweep across the state and across the country. You had the Year of the Woman, you had some issues with confirmation at the Supreme Court related to sex and gender that I think allowed for a lot of women's issues to be prevalent in the news cycle and also to carry at the polls. What I can tell you is that in the primary, I won the primary over 2 women candidates by 10,000 votes and just barely missed being elected to the office in the primary. I then moved on to the general election, where I picked up 90,000 more votes than I had received in the general, and got about 41–42% of the general population vote across 4 counties. I received every endorsement that there was, as opposed to my opponent, who received none that I'm aware of. I raised $80,000 in my campaign, and according to her own budgeting, she raised $1,800 from outside sources. There was a tremendous difference in the 2 candidates. I'm not going to talk about the individual, I just want to talk about the campaign. But during the course of the campaign, received the endorsement twice of the AFL-CIO in Volusia and Flagler counties, the unions in Volusia and Flagler counties, the teachers in Volusia and Flagler counties, the police organizations in Volusia and Flagler counties. I also received the endorsement of the Realtors Association here in Flagler County, prominent business leaders, local government officials, to include the former clerk of court here in Flagler County, and was endorsed by the Palm Coast Observer not once but twice during the course of the election. Ultimately, there's a knowledge and a wisdom that comes from being vetted and going through this process with the JNC that's passed on to the governor. so that you have the opportunity to select qualified candidates. I believe that my trial record, my court record, my record in this community makes me a qualified candidate with you. There's a lot of things that have happened in the last year that I'd be glad to update you about as far as personal and professional involvement, if you have any interest.
Yeah, so you've listed those and updated your application, but go ahead and run through them for us.
Yeah, in the last year, I've received the Criminal Justice Professional of the Year Award from the Victim Services Coalition of the 7th Circuit for Volusia, Flagler, St. John's, and Putnam. I received an award at the annual dinner for Daytona Beach Police Department of meritorious recognition for perseverance and diligence in investigation and prosecution of major crimes in our community. I've earned recognition by Daytona Beach News Journal as well as the business community for Top 40 Under 40, and was further distinguished to receive and be named the Government Sector Employee of the Year, or Government Sector Leader of the Year, excuse me. Last month I taught a 2-hour course at the Detectives School to 150 detectives on the 4th and 5th Amendment and its impact on major case investigations. And yesterday I taught a 90-minute class on the collection, retention, and use of digital evidence and digital forensics in homicide investigations. Since January, I've successfully prosecuted by trial 5 homicide cases, all first-degree murders, all first-chair cases, where individuals were convicted as charged. One of those cases was a death penalty, and received in that a unanimous death recommendation from the jury, one of 5 or so that's been given in the last 20 years in this circuit. Since January, I've spent 9 weeks in trial. I have another trial that's set for next week where a young football player was killed at a Bethune-Cookman College event. 2 innocent bystanders were also shot, and one of them almost perished. By way of other work, I've had 5 or 6 pleas in the course of the year. One of them as recently as an hour and a half ago, where an individual pled to manslaughter and received a 15-year sentence. But I've worked out 5 or 6 cases, sentences anywhere from 5 years all the way up to 50 years. I've taken on leadership in my Rotary and worked within that organization and that club to raise funds and attention for a group called Legacy House, which fosters and assists foster children who have aged out of the system. We're working on a service project for them in the next couple of months, but they've been able to help 17 or 18 young girls with housing and shelter and assistance as they move out of the programs and into the real world. I've taken on and continued my membership in Stuart Marchman, where I've elevated to the role of Vice President of the foundation, which raises money for the treatment of mental health and substance abuse issues in our community, and notably raised enough money to create and construct the Vince Carter Sanctuary just about 3 miles down the street, where Project Warm, one of my favorite projects, has located to give young mothers an opportunity to raise their children free of the dangers of drugs and addiction. I've elevated also to the role of Vice President the Tiger Bay Club of Volusia County, and several times visited the Flagler County Tiger Bay Club to spend time with individuals that I met and became friends with during the course of my campaign. Been a keynote speaker for the National Junior Honor Society at their annual meeting in Ormond Beach for the middle schoolers in that area, and talking with kids about how to set their goals for success. And I've been the closing speaker both in 2018 and 19 for the National Day of Remembrance, which is a ceremony honoring the friends and family of victims lost to violent crimes in the course of the last year. I was an assistant coach for my 8-year-old baseball team in the spring, and I've gotten 3 kids through another year of adolescence and childhood, which is probably the most difficult thing on that list. Meanwhile, my wife starts back to school, is back in school, teaching kindergarten classes and giving her dedicated service to the community.
You wouldn't know this, but 3 hours ago, Jim Manfrey sat where you're sitting and said he was very interested in running against anyone appointed who wasn't a Flagler County resident. So, talk about your ability to, we talked about electability in the past, let's talk about electability
Sure.
in the future, and particularly knowing there are people who would run against someone who wasn't at this precise moment a Flagler County resident?
I think that's always a concern. I mean, I think everyone in this room knows that this has become a political position more than it has ever been in history. We have judges that have held office in 30, 40 years and never been challenged, and in the last 10 years we've seen an emergence of challengers to sitting judges for a myriad of reasons. I fully expect that I will, if appointed, if selected, that I would have a challenger, that I would have to face a challenger, and that I would have to go through the rigors of another campaign. But frankly, I enjoyed running a campaign. It's something that I had always wanted to do all my life. I was pretty successful at it. I think given a different year, a different tone of the national audience that had filtered through to our community, we would have seen a different outcome in the results. I certainly had the support of the community and the legal profession. Thousands of supporters are still, asking when it is that I'm going to run again. I don't have any problem running for office. I fully expect to be selected.
Other questions from the commission?
Do you recall how well you did in Flagler County when you ran?
I do. I think I did 38% in Flagler County, 37%, 38% in the general. I did better than that in the primary. Again, I can't speak to the results in any other way than I already have, just because I consider them to be a fluke, frankly. The person never even came to Flagler County once during the campaigns I'm aware of.
Are you familiar with the changes that are about to take place with county court jurisdiction?
I am, as far as some of the monetary changes for thresholds in crime and some of the personnel changes that the legislature is looking at and the Supreme Court is looking at.
Any idea, I know it's a guess, but any idea what that's going to do to the caseload here?
I don't know. I think there's a decertification issue in Putnam County, which could cause issues, for Putnam and increase the workload depending upon how that works out, shifting it to the circuit bench. One of the great things about this county is that there are 2 sitting circuit judges, and there will be 2 county judges to kind of share the load. I think probably a large part of this position will be circuit work that's shifted down and given jurisdiction to the county court to handle many of the affairs of the circuit.
Ryan, you read off a list of a lot of nice things you've done and recognition you've received. You do a lot of things behind the scenes as well. I learned, this is minor, but you were offering to switch with someone who is in trial this week and trying to help them find the right time and offer them your time. And I just commend that to someone who is sort of in competition with you, that you would be so gracious.
No, it's everybody's in this together. If it's convenient for me to switch, then Mark wouldn't. I hope Mark had a nice time with you and got back and diligently worked on his case.
We let him out on time, is
Good.
all I can say.
Good.
Yeah, no more than
Good.
that. Any other questions from the commission? Anything you want to leave us with?
No, I've worked very hard to come to this point in my career, and I hope that you'll see that, and I hope that you'll recognize the skills and abilities that I've developed with a lifetime in the courtroom. I continue to strive for this position. I'll work hard if selected. That I'll give it my all, as I always have in every endeavor that I've pursued. So I'd appreciate your vote and selection to the governor and your assistance in this pursuit. Thank you.